Welcome back. I'm sorry, I'm in a kind of goofy mood, y'all. All right, today's video is about what happens when you ask God to renew your mind. And I wanted to talk about this because sometimes in the past, I've passively just said, Lord, renew my mind, renew my heart, purify my heart, purify my mind. Like, give me the mind of Christ. And sometimes we passively ask God for things and we don't really recognize, like, what are we really asking God to do? And are we prepared for what that looks like on the other side after that prayer has been said? Because, sometimes, and I'm not gonna say sometimes, I'm speaking really for myself, but I believe that sometimes this could be relatable because, you know, who doesn't do this? Let me know. Like, have you ever done this? Have you ever asked God for something and you go, after you finish your prayer, you spend your quiet time, your private time with the Lord, and you move on with your day. You get up, you go to work, you go to school, you got the kids, whatever you're doing, you rush out the house, you go right on about your day. You're not thinking about that prayer like that much anymore. You like, God got it. He heard me. He heard me. I asked him for it, and I'm moving on with my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, not just ignoring and not forgetting that God is a real spirit that we have to interact with, but just knowing that, you know what, I gotta move on with my day. So, that's where this topic is coming from. Like, what happens once you ask God to renew your mind? Like, are you really prepared for what He has for you once you asked Him to renew your mind? And what happens after that? And what does that really look like after you have done that? Like, okay, because God got me. Like, I think this was like last week that it was happening to me once I had asked God to like renew my mind, and I didn't really take into consideration like what He was going to do, what He is doing, what that looks like. So a full breakdown of that is like, for example, like, what if you ask Him financially? So what does that look like? You're asking, like, if you have a poor mindset when it comes to your finances, like you're struggling, and you ask Him to renew your mind for financial um, renewing, like, renew my mind when it comes to my finances, Lord. And if like, if you take the time to like really think about it, right? Like, oh, sometimes people have a scarcity mindset. I guess that's the best way to like say it. Like, that the way that you operate when it comes to your finances, like, you recognize that there's a spirit of poverty and you need to break free from that. God will change your perspectives. God will change your perspectives on how you spend or how you save your money, where you invest it, and God will remove certain habits or even people from your life, right? So what that can look like is like, okay, well, I know that anytime I hang around so-and-so, anytime I get around my brothers or my sisters, I end up spending money. I'm always looking out for other people. And then when it comes down to it, I don't have the money that I once had or need because I spent it on other people, or making sure everybody else was good, making sure that they were good, or I went out and I had a good time, and now because I don't have the money that I was supposed to have or had, I'm struggling in another area of my life. Okay, so sometimes God will remove those people from your life because God sees the bigger picture. He knows that if you keep this certain individual around, if you stay in this certain relationship, if you stay in this certain friendship, you are going to keep putting that money over there, or they're going to keep asking, or they're going to keep, certain people are even just sent to your life just to be a barrier when it comes to your finances, and God has to remove those people, and you have to be okay with that. And that's part of the renewing, like letting go of people. Sometimes when it comes to your finances, that's part of moving forward, and part of the renewing of your mind is letting people go and learning how to save, learning how to budget. This can be extremely difficult in the moment because you don't understand that that's your prayer. When you pray to God and you ask Him to renew your mind, and you don't understand, like, why is this stuff falling off? Like, why are these people leaving? Why? And then sometimes He'll even call you to bigger. Like, once He's gotten rid of the mess, and I know I'm probably skipping ahead of myself when it comes to the notes, then He'll require more of you, and that territory could seem unfamiliar to you. So you spending money on yourself or in other places could feel like, oh man, I shouldn't be doing this. But like I said, I don't want to get too ahead of myself because I'm skipping over some stuff. However, that was really a big point for me to mention, because I'm like, man, like I said, I went through this last week, so I had to bring y'all the video. Like I said, this can be extremely difficult in the moment if we forget that God does answer prayer, and what we imagine in our minds isn't what we thought God was going to do. So when you ask God to renew your mind and help you with, like I said, for example, your finances, it might not look like how you thought it was going to look. Like, God, I thought you was going to bring more money in. I thought that I was going to get a raise on the job. I thought that I was going to get this little new hustle in, but it does not always look like what you thought it was going to look like. Like, you don't have God's mind. You have no idea what God has planned for you and how that is going to, like how your life is going to change. You only have this in your mind, like probably what you think God is going to do, or what you think that he should do, or what he can do. Like, that could be a thing that is holding you back sometimes, like, because you think that God is supposed to come in your life and do something, and that's not what he's going to do. So you have to let go. There's a scripture that is 1 Corinthians 2:16. It says, "For who hath known the mind of the Lord, that he may construct him, or excuse me, that he may instruct him, but we have the mind of Christ." So, and there's another scripture that I wanted to bring up about casting down all your imaginations. And so pretty much like being aware that you don't think like God. Don't try to get ahead and think that, you have this. And I get it, like us as people, we have our own imaginations, we have our own thoughts, but you don't know the thoughts of God. And you have to stay humble about that. So whenever he does change your life, whenever he does come in and do something different, you have to be ready, open, and willing, and ready to receive that new change. Because if you're not, then you're going to reject exactly the process and the things that God has for you, that he's trying to do in your life, that's something new for you, right? So another example is asking God to renew your mind when it comes to relationships. A lot of people get stuck in relationships in a way that where they believe that, oh, this is how everybody is. This is how every single girl that I've ever dealt with. This is how every single guy I've ever dealt with. This is how the whole world is. Or this is how every girl is in my city. This is how every guy is in my state. And then they won't even deal with people in their area because they believe that, oh, okay, you know what? Oh, and they get this mindset, like they get stuck in a rut, like it's just a groove that they're in, that like, oh, okay, that's how all these men are. That's how all yeah, and you can't teach them nothing. You can't. They're not open to anything new. You can't talk to them about anything, and it just becomes like a brick wall. Like you go keep hitting that brick wall because they have this belief in their mind, and like their attitude, the way that they talk about it, like everything about them is just, you can't get through to them. So when you ask God to renew your mind, like you have to be open and receptive to new information, new ideas, new thoughts, godly ways, godly thoughts, biblical, whatever God is trying to teach you that's new. You have to let the old go. You cannot keep holding on to that. So even though, despite your experiences, you have to, part of renewing your mind is being open and receptive to new information. Part of renewing your mind is being open and receptive to new information, to new ways, to new behavior, to new speech. God is trying to open up your eyes so therefore you can have better discernment, so you can let go of these spiritual things that have been holding you back, possibly for generations within your family. Okay? Besides the obvious, yes, God may or may not remove certain people from your life. Sometimes he could teach you from difficult... I lost my track of thought here. I'm sorry, I wrote this stuff down, but I don't know where it went. He can teach you from difficult people in your life. Okay, right? So, have you ever had a noisy neighbor? Like, for example, have you ever stayed in an apartment or just had, even if you stay in a house, sometimes your neighbors next door, they can be pretty loud. And then it can make you feel some type of way, right? It can make you feel like, oh, I just can't stand them. I want to go over there and knock on their door and cuss them out or something, right? Like, that is a moment of teaching. Like, the best thing that I can tell you to do to overcome something like that is to stop and take a pause, take a breath, and recognize, what is God trying to teach me in this moment? Because if you go and you lead with your first mind, you're going to be over there, hey, wow, and you cussing about next to the police got called and all the neighbors in the whole neighborhood are coming over there. You done lost it. You've completely lost it. You done lost all control of the situation, right? Okay, another example is, have you ever dealt with a bad or less than desirable supervisor, right? That's another good one. If you don't know how to handle the situation at work, if you lose total control, God can renew your mind in so many different areas. Like I said, relationships, on the job, at home, in your marriage, a spouse that you have chosen to do life with, right? That you have chosen till death do us part. Renewing your mind when it comes to relationships. That one right there, that's a life teaching moment, because to deal with somebody else for the rest of their lives, their flaws, their good, their bad, you need to renew your mind. Otherwise, you'll be down there at the divorce court and you'll be having to see somebody because you think that they're the problem. You think that they're the problem. It's not you, it's them. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it is other people, but even then, God will help you renew your mind so you can better learn how to deal with this person, because there's certain things unknown and unbeknownst to you and unseen to your natural eyes that you sometimes don't consider whenever you're dealing with another person. Okay? Those are 3 different types of relationships that I just gave you: on the job, on the job, your neighbors, and if you're married. However, in each of these areas, depending on where you are at in life, you have a choice on how to respond in each of those situations. That's the point, right? So when you're asking God to renew your mind, you should see evidence of where He slowly but surely, gradually will change you. And so long as you're seeking Him daily, if you read your word, you get your newspaper out, like I like to say, get your newspaper out, read your word daily, and you ask God to renew your mind, you'll start to notice a gradual change. Like, slowly you'll be like, oh man, I never thought that while I'm here at the store and I'm getting frustrated while I'm waiting this long line, that the person who's supposed to be checking everybody out, there's only one person working here today, and maybe people quit, and you have no idea that, but how you treat that person and how you handle that person, instead of coming up there disgruntled, like, oh, they need to get and telling the person who's up there at the front of the line, who's been checking out everybody, and she's been there since probably working a double or whatever, and you go up there, you give them a piece of your mind, and you have no idea what that person is going through, what they're experiencing. God will help you tone it down, bring it down a notch or 3, depending on how bad you are and how irritated you are. And it'll cause you to be more conscientious about other people around you, the environment around you, and it'll help you be more humble and probably even more helpful, to say the least. Okay? And you begin to think, when you reflect, you begin to think to yourself, wow, don't expect things to stay the same when asking God to renew your mind. Expect change. And change can be different. Change can be difficult, especially when you don't know that is what's happening. You don't recognize that in this moment, whenever you're literally having a breakdown, like when something new is happening in your life, like this is so new to me. Like, I just would never do anything. Like, because God is going to get you out of that pattern of behavior. And that can be a shock. Like, that can be a huge rift. Like, it can literally disrupt your whole day if you don't stop and say, you know what? I do remember praying. And I do remember asking God to help me with this. And that's probably what's going on right now. I'm experiencing a difficult shift because my mind is being renewed even in this moment, and it's difficult for me. Like, begin to have grace and understanding and mercy for yourself when you are going through a big change, especially when it comes to finances and relationships and all those types of things. Because if you don't stop and take a break and take a pause, like, it could literally like wreck your whole day. That's what happened to me last week. Like, I didn't recognize that when I asked God to renew my mind, and it started to happen and it started to shift, because it was, even though to some people, like, it might be a small change, but like when it's happening to you, like, it's a big change. And that's how it's always been for me in my life. Anytime something new has popped up in my life, and anything has been like, anytime it's been a required change, I always have a big reaction to it. I feel like it's the worst thing that's happening to me, or like it's the biggest thing, and nothing else can, like, everything has to stop, because whatever's going on with me in that day, in that moment, in that time frame, like, oh my gosh, like, stop the whole world. But know that things will not stay the same. Things will not stay the same, because what you ask God for is for him to make a change in your life, okay? I know I had a couple of other things I wanted to touch on. Oh, yes. So, one thing to know, that when you ask God to renew your mind, the first thing you need to know is that God heard you. Sometimes, because we get so impatient in the process of waiting, like you ask God to, like, renew your mind and to change your situation, and you done waited about a week or 3 weeks, 4, 5 weeks, whatever the time may be, you feel like that he taking too long. And sometimes you want to go out there and you want to go find another alternative. You want to go find another solution to whatever your problem is, because you become impatient, right? But one thing you have to know is, because sometimes, like, even in that impatience, we feel like, oh, maybe God didn't hear me. Maybe I need to go back and say it louder. Maybe I need to go back and repeat it over and over and over and over and over again. And there is a time sometimes where you need to stay in prayer, but sometimes you don't have to do all of that. You know, God heard you the first time. Okay, he heard your prayer, no matter how short or how long the prayer was. And no, you don't need to do too much for God to hear your prayers. Okay, here's a couple scriptures I want to share with you, right? In 1 Peter 3:12, for the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. Okay, so it seems pretty simple to me. Don't be out here doing no evil, and God will hear your prayers. Just wrap it up short and simple, right? In John chapter 9, verse 31, it says, now we know that God heareth not sinners. But if any man be a worshiper of God and doeth his will, him he heareth. Okay? Just reinforcing that, right? So you can't be out here living in willful sin repeatedly, and then you want to go and run to God and be like, hey, I need some money. Hey, I want my spouse. And you out here just sending it up. He don't hear your prayer. God is not to be played with. You know what I'm saying? He's not out here blessing you while you out here in willful sin, just doing whatever you think you want to do, and then you just go run to him, and he's going, boop, there you go. No, that's not how it works. Okay, let's not be ignorant, okay? God is not somebody to be played with, okay? It's important, because sometimes we may feel that God didn't hear our prayer, because in our human minds we expect results. However, God shows up in real life, and that's what I really wanted to drive home for you today, is that God shows up in the real everyday life of that you're living. Once you say amen, you leave your home. I'm sorry, my oven's going off, but I'm almost about to wrap this up. Once you leave your home and you go out into the real world, that's where it happens. That's where it happens. Real life takes place, and God, you have to seek God even in those moments, okay? So when you're asking God to renew your mind, expect change. Things will not stay the same. And if you have faith, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.